Okay, so I'm going to show you in this video how to build a part like this. So I call this a perpendicular linkage. And if we take a look at this part, it's essentially symmetrical. It's going to have a center of gravity. It's pretty much in the middle. So you can see that only in the X direction is it off a little bit, but that's because we have two different holes. You have a 4mm hole here, and then on the top view, we have a 5mm hole. So that should be 0, 0, 0 as we go through that. But the way it's sketched right now, the way it's designed right now, it's going to be off by just a little bit in the X direction. But essentially, it's a symmetrical part with geometry that's about 90 degrees from each other on a different plane. So how do you sketch a part like this that's symmetrical about a plane like that at about a 90-degree angle to itself? So let's talk about this. I mean, whenever you start a SolidWorks part, you got to think about the base feature. One of the base features in here could be just like a regular 10mm by 10mm by a 50mm long rectangle, and then you begin to put your other features into this. That could be your base feature, and I think that's how we're going to start this. There's going to be a different way of doing that too. So maybe on this side, the left side, we're going to put in that fillet, kind of a full round fillet, but we can do that as a 5mm fillet on either corner over here. And then we can go ahead and put in that hole in here, and then put in this cut. Maybe put that cut and the hole in the same feature if we want to do that. It's all going to be a cut. And then maybe before we put those cuts in, we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to rotate it and go look at the front view, put a hole over here, and put these cuts in here too after we put in that feature fillet. So let's try that. We're going to bring this back and forth as we go through this. Let's go ahead and start with the top view. And of course, there's lots of different ways of modeling this. I'm going to show you a couple different ways, at least initially. So let's go to the top plane, go to sketch. Let's go to center rectangle. Let's go ahead and sketch this out roughly the way we want it to be. So let's go ahead and put a dimension in this guy. This is going to be 10. And this one's going to be 150, right? No, 50, just a regular old 50. And then we're going to go to features, go to extruded boss space. We're going to go mid-plane. And remember, we're going to make this 10mm. And I think the material in here is AISI 1020. So let's go ahead and right-click and let's go to edit our materials. And let's go ahead and grab that AISI 1020. Go to apply and then close. So now we're going to put in our fillet. So our fillet is going to be 5mm. So go down here to keep all the other items in here default, so we're just going to do a regular fillet in here, and we're going to keep it symmetric. We're going to make that 5mm, and we're going to go ahead and select on that edge, and then this edge over here. And conceivably, save a little bit of time, we can click on this edge over here and that edge over here, kind of get all that stuff done at the same time in one feature. So now it's still symmetrical, and we can double check that too. If you go to evaluate and go to mass properties, the center of mass is still 0, 0, 0. So what we're designing here are going to be symmetric about two different planes that are perpendicular to each other. So now we can go ahead and do some more features. If we click on this face, go to sketch, we can conceivably go to the top plane and do that. But we're going to go ahead and take that circle and go over here. We're going to make that concentric, put a value on that. We're going to make that 5mm, and then go to features, extruded cut. And maybe make it go through all. Otherwise, it'd be through all both if you want to do that on the top plane when you put that together. And we could conceivably take our cut extrude, and we should rename these, and we could actually add the additional sketch elements in here. So one thing we could do is we can go to center rectangle and kind of sketch this out. Maybe put that over here. And now we're going to put this over here. So the center of that rectangle is going to be about 4mm from the center over here. And we can define that a little bit better by putting in a center line. We just put in something like that if we want to do that. Remember the top of the center line? If it's blue, it's okay as long as the center line itself is black. That's a test question, so make sure you understand that. And then we're going to put in a dimension in here, 4. So we're going to go over the side. We're going to make that a double dimension or a diameter dimension. Sometimes SolidWorks calls that a double dimension. So it's going to be symmetrical. If we take the center point of that center rectangle and that origin, if we make that horizontal, that provides us some symmetry so that it's just as much on the top as it is the bottom as we stretch that out. We're going to go ahead and put a 2mm dimension over here. And we're going to put in some fillets, some sketch fillets, and these are going to be 2.5mm. So we're going to go over here to the Properties Manager, put in 2.5. We're going to go ahead and click on that point, and that point over here, right click, And now we have that set. So now when we rebuild this, we already have a feature associated with this. Cut extrude, we're adding, well, we can't really open that for some reason, but there's a sketch that's driving cut extrude 1. And if we go ahead and rebuild that, it's going to go ahead and include that cut in there. So we can probably call this top cuts. And probably rename our features if you want to do that. And that would just be plain fillet. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. We can probably call that base, just so we can tell these apart. So there's that feature, and then we're going to do the same thing in this face. We're going to go to that face. We're going to go normal too. We're going to go ahead and sketch out a circle in here, kind of exaggerate that a little bit, make that circle. And that edge, we're going to make that concentric. Another, this one is going to be 4 millimeters, so we want to make sure we get the same value. And we're going to put in these cuts in here too. So here's a different way of doing the cuts. We could do a corner rectangle. And start over here in this edge and kind of sketch that out. Again, we can go ahead and put in the center line. We can take from here down there and make this 4 millimeters from that edge over here. Again, it's kind of like what we did before. We can make this 2 millimeters, just like we did before, but we don't have the symmetry we had before. So now we have to define it. It's not always good practice to put in a bunch of dimensions. We could have one dimension drive everything. So we could do something like this. Maybe we can take a center line from the midpoint of that line, take it to the origin, take that center line and make that horizontal. Lots of different ways of doing this. And then if we go back to our fillet, we can go ahead and fillet these two things. Now what it's saying here too, if we read that, a segment being filleted has a midpoint or equal length or equidistant relation. Equidistant relation will be created, and the geometry might move if the fillet is created. You want to continue. In other words, it's going to not consider this midpoint relationship. It might even get rid of it. And if we do that a second time, it's going to give us the second thing, or the second warning in there. But essentially, it's going to be symmetric when we're all done with that. So we're okay with that. Nothing's going to change. We're going to go to the green check mark, and now we have that in place. And now we can do an extruded cut. Yep. Got to get out of the fillet over here. So green check mark over here in the Properties Manager. Extruded cut. Let's go to through all, go to the green check mark. Now let's check our mass properties and make sure they're the same with everything else. So if we go to Evaluate, Mass Properties, now it's off by a little bit. And I think we're looking at 3 units after the decimal. So make sure you go up here to Options. Go down here to Custom Settings. We're going to make that 3. Swing this guy all the way up to the highest and go to OK. So now it should be 16.424 as it is in the drawing. And then in the X direction, it should be off by 0.0272. Let's see if we have that. So in X direction is off by 0.272. So that's one way of doing it. Okay, so here's another way of doing it. Again, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of variations within each way that you're doing this, but let me show you a different way of doing this. So we're going to go ahead and sketch again from the top line. We're going to put all this geometry in here. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to put in a center rectangle in here first, and then we're going to fillet the corners as a sketch fillet first. Put in this geometry over here, going to make square ends over here, and then come back in as a feature and put in those, those fillet radiuses by way of a feature, kind of a feature fillet. So we're going to start with the top plane. Go to Sketch. We're going to go to Center Rectangle. It's going to square it up for us, so we're going to sketch that out. And now we're going to put in this dimension, which is going to be 50, and this one's going to be 10, just like it was before. But this time we're going to put in our sketch fillet in here instead of a feature fillet. So let's take these lines in here with the Control key to press. Let's go ahead and take those lines and make those for construction. I didn't see that option in here, but let's try that again. Actually, options down here, they got closed for some reason. But let's go ahead and make that for construction. So now we're going to sketch in some lines in here. We're going to sketch a line in over here. We have that line in the back, which is okay. We're going to sketch a line in over here, kind of exaggerate that a little bit. We're going to put in a tangent arc, maybe from this line over here to somewhere over there. Kind of connect these two together. Make that, we're going to merge those points. Then we're going to take this arc over here in that line. We're going to make that tangent. And then this arc over here and that line over here, we're going to make that tangent too. So what we have in here is a reference rectangle in the background that we could use in order to put this together. and then we sketched in our elements on top of that, and that reference geometry is just now a model line over here on the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and sketch some more stuff out. In fact, let's take this line over here, and let's convert that to reference geometry too, construction geometry. And by doing that, it gives us the ability to sketch more stuff in here. So now we're going to sketch a line down here, kind of go over here like that, sketch this line down here like that, go over here like that, and get our enclosed geometry again like we're looking for. And let's go ahead and take go from that line to that point. We can't go to the other side, so let's go ahead and put in some additional reference geometry in here. We can't choose a midpoint over here because now that line is a little bit shorter. But we can choose a midpoint if we're careful with it. We can choose a midpoint of that construction geometry and then sketch that down. So now we can put a dimension between this line over here and that center line, and we're going to make that 4. We're going to make this 2, and it doesn't really define this line very well. In fact, we can probably move that around a little bit too. It's not really symmetrical there. So what can we do here? Well, we can make this line, conceivably, and this line up here, we can make those equal to each other. That's one way of doing it. Or we can draw another center line between that point and a midpoint over here, make that horizontal. Lots of different ways we can do it. So now let's take our enclosed geometry. Hopefully it's enclosed. We didn't miss anything. Okay, we get the yellow preview, which means it's going to be in pretty good shape. Instead of blind, we're going to go to midplane, keep it symmetrical, and we're going to go to the green check mark. And now we're going to go ahead and put some fillets in here, but we're missing that hole. So let's go back to our base feature, and let's just call this base. Let's go back to our sketch, right-click on our sketch 1, and let's put in that hole. So let's go normal 2. And now we have a reference for this hole over here, so we don't have to make that concentric, because it's going to be right there in the middle. And we just have to put a dimension on it. And that's going to be 5 millimeters for this one. If we go ahead and rebuild it, now it's going to incorporate that hole. So now we can do the same thing to this. So we can go to the front plane and actually sketch on that. So let's go normal 2. Control 8 will allow us to do that. And with this one, we're going to make it round in this end and square in that end. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and go back to our sketch. Let's go ahead and sketch this out. So we can go to kind of a center rectangle if you want to do that. This time we could pick up the geometry that's already there and kind of park that there. We could take this end, and we're not going to put that on the origin over here. We're not going to put the center on the origin because we want to be able to keep that, and we want to keep it flexible. Then we're going to take this end down here, and we're going to try to grab that corner. So now we have 3 sides that are fully defined. And we're going to go ahead and take this geometry in here too, and do kind of like what we did before. We're going to take all that geometry and we're going to turn it into construction geometry. Okay, so the only thing that's not defined is over on this side, and we need to maybe park that over here too to do that. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and sketch our lines out here again in a very similar manner that we did last time. Let's go ahead and put those together, and yeah, we're going to exaggerate this a little bit. Make those lines kind of skewed. And then we go over here, what we could do is we can go right into the arc. So how did I do that? So if we go to that endpoint down here and go back to it as we're sketching out that line, it turns into an arc. And that's kind of cool. And we can go back up to the endpoint of this line. And now we can begin to define it. So that arc and this line are going to be, they're going to be tangent. This arc and that line over here, that construction geometry on that center rectangle, is going to be tangent too. We're going to make this line and this line, we're going to make that parallel to each other because they weren't before. Let's put a dimension on that. We're going to make that dimension 2. We're going to make this line horizontal or vertical and drag that over here. And this time we can put in that center line from that origin over here. And we can put in our 4 millimeter dimension to the center over here. Put that over on this side and make that 4. And now we can put in a center line over here too. So we can take a center line going off in this direction to provide this symmetry here and pick up that line, this line, and this line and make that symmetrical. So now it's almost fully defined. Now let's put in our hole. Oh, not an ellipse, but a hole. Let's put that in here. Put our dimension on it. This one's going to be the 4 millimeter hole. And now we can do our features. So we're going to go to extrude a cut. Let's see what our preview is going to do. Let's go ahead and do midplane. And then we can keep that 10 millimeters if you want to do that. Or we do through all both. That'll do the same thing. That's probably better if our model were to get bigger. Oh, it's cutting stuff out. So what did we do wrong here? Let's do this. Let's go down to our selected contours. And we're going to keep all bodies too. And see what we did. So what it's doing here, if you take a look at our geometry that we have in place, it is considering that we might be cutting over here. So let's do this. Let's go and rebuild this. Let's take our cut extrude. Let's right click on it. Let's go to delete. Let's go back to the basic sketch that we had before. And this time we're going to define our contours. So we're going to go to our sketch 2. We're going to go to our extruded cut. And then we're going to go ahead and click on just a sketch element over here if you want to go ahead and choose your feature first. And then we're going to go to midplane. And now we're going to do our cut in here. So we want to make sure we want to flip the side of the cut to the outside. So let's go ahead and do that. So now the cut's going to be on the outside. If we go to the green check mark, now we kind of have what we're looking for. But let's go back in here. So it didn't pick up our hole. So if we go back in here and go to our select contours, we already have the one contour in here, which is the outside of that. But if we pick up that hole over here for the second contour, now we're going to include that hole too. So if we're going to go to the green check mark, now we have that cut. So the last thing we need to do is we need to put in our feature fillet. So let's go to fillet. We're going to make this 2.5 millimeters. And we're going to go ahead and select on that edge, that edge, and this other edge down here. Should be able to pick that up. There it is. We're going to go ahead and put that into place. Whoops. It's going off in the wrong direction. So let's take those last two. Let's go ahead and clear that. Yep. Okay. Well, we're going to pick on this edge, and then that edge. Then hopefully, it's this edge up here. We're going to pick up that edge and this edge. So they're rotated about 90 degrees. If you do that, go to the green check mark. That should put that into place. So that's another way of doing it. But let's check our model to make sure the integrity is the same. If we go over here to evaluate, go to mass properties. Now we want to make sure our options are up here. We're going to go to 3 decimals after that. So mass is 2.79 grams. We didn't specify our material, so let's go ahead and do that. So right click on this, edit material, AISI 1020. Because we didn't get the mass properties right. We some sort of plastic material, I think by default is what it uses. So if we go to mass properties in here, now we get 16.424 and then 272 on the x-axis, and it's the same that you see over here. So a couple of different ways of doing this. There's a lot of ways of executing a model like this. I think the desire is probably to try to keep our features as few as possible. So we only did this in just a couple different, 3 different features, whereas our previous model did that in 4. So a little bit of trade-off either way. You trade time for fewer features or more features and less time. Whatever is easiest for you, as long as you get the right answer, then the model is going to be correct.